Just gonna let people come in right now. I see our participants are coming in.
Great.
Yeah. How are we doing? Yep, numbers are still crawling. That's good. Thank you, everybody. We're gonna be waiting just a little bit to make sure everybody gets through the door. Really excited to have you all, and this is going to be a phenomenal topic. I'm just letting people come in real quick, and then we'll get started shortly. Thank you, everybody. Let's get started. So hello, everybody who's been here before. Welcome back to the Healthy Building webinar series. We've been doing this since we all were put into isolation with the pandemic. So now that the summer's coming and that we're finding our different ways to be moving through with our built environment, we want to talk about how to make your buildings healthy, how to make your buildings progressive and zero carbon, because it is possible. And it's not just a pie in the sky thing. It's literally achievable for the typical developer. And Bazanni is going to prove how they've done it through their construction and design. Before we get started, I want to thank Consumers Energy Commercial Real Estate Program for sponsoring this program today. So they work with commercial real estate properties who help them better understand their energy and how to support them to find solutions which work for them. This means energy benchmarking, this means financial incentives, technical assistance. So thank you very much, the CRU program, for sponsoring this webinar today. Oops. So my name is Jillian Gam. Probably some of you already know me. I'm the program manager for the U.S. Green Building Council. And today we have the privilege to speak with Peter and Heather from Bazzani. And from my perspective, when I think of Bazzani, I think of their strong sustainable reputation they have as a developer. Their slogan is to create sustainable communities. And honestly, before I even knew that's what I thought of them. They create the innovation into conventional and to prove that you always can make the cutting edge the new normal. So can't wait to have Peter speak on the new Bradford Station project today. Would you mind taking it over, Peter?
Absolutely, Jillian, thank you so much. Right. Okay, did that work? Is everybody seeing
I see it.
Mostly white screen? All right,
yep.
Thank you. So again, Jillian, thanks so much for the introduction, and it's been great working with Jillian and Sherry on the 2030 district in Grand Rapids, and what can we do to support that movement and recognizing how important that is. So, well, and thank you for the introduction. So I'm Peter Skornia, president of Bazanni Building Company. And we have Heather Coyne, who's a vice president and working with doing our marketing and a lot of getting this message out, both about what we're talking about today, but also about the connection to our clients. And in the case of this for Bradford Station is the tenants in our building. So we're a B Corp, and if anybody's not familiar with that, boy, I'd love it if you look it up. Just a really great program that we're proud to be part of. And Lead for Homes, this project we're going after a Lead for Homes certification, and of course the Grand Rapids 2030 district. And then as we're talking a lot about carbon neutrality, I just threw a couple of things up here about our certificates and what that process has been like for us. we've done it in a couple of ways. We did it for Bazzani Building Company. So as an operating company, we went through a process last year of evaluating what is our carbon footprint. We looked at what are our energy bills, how much water do we consume, what kind of cars do we drive, how many miles are we putting on a year for all of our staff. Add all of that up, you get a carbon footprint, and then a couple of things. One, purchase offsets to get that down to zero, which the stamp there shows. But then also in looking at those numbers, see what can we do differently so that next year that number is lower. And with all of the constraints of the COVID crisis, one positive thing that came out of it is working from home. And you know, I know for me personally, I've put a lot fewer miles on my vehicle this year than I did last year. So that'll be a savings for us next year. So, okay, with that, then we've broken this down, and starting with why renewable energy. And a slide here from the C2ES climate innovation process that commercial and residential buildings account for 29% of greenhouse gas, including the fuel that's used to create electricity. And that's a big part of it. A lot of our electricity now comes from fossil fuels. By changing that, by moving that to renewable energy, even if we're not doing anything with the building, that 29% goes down substantially. And then if we look at within the building itself, today we're focused on residential. Bradford Station is an apartment building. It's mostly residential. We do have one retail space in the building. So a huge chunk of that comes from space heating and cooling. And we're going to talk about that today, about what we did for Bradford. And then water heating, cooking appliances, electronics. These other ones get into lifestyle choices. So for us as building owners, that's going to be a learning process going forward. How do our tenants act in the building? But that's something we'll measure. And we're hoping that turns into a circular dialogue with our tenants about understanding what is their carbon footprint and what can they do to reduce it. So with this, we can reduce the emissions and we can get to zero in the operations of buildings if we take some relatively simple steps. So first of all, with construction, we're starting in this case with new construction. This is a ground up development, building a more energy efficient and all electric building. From an energy efficient standpoint, doing a good thermal envelope, well sealed, insulated, thoughtful about orientation. So in the case of Bradford, it worked out very well. Our southern exposure is a narrow end of the building. We don't have a lot of direct sunlight coming into units. Right-sized. We're not big believers in the tiny house. For people that do it, great. And I think they're a really cool concept, but it's not something we do. But definitely thinking about how space layout is done and that every space counts and has purpose. Energy efficient, all electric heating, cooling, and hot water systems. We're going to get into a lot more detail later on about how that does. That right-sized appliances. That we're doing single bedroom apartments here that we don't need to have gigantic refrigerators. We don't need to have full-size dishwashers. So we've brought those appliance size down so they work well with the lifestyle of the people in the home. It's keeping those things in balance. The next big one, getting our electricity from renewable sources. And there's a couple of ways to do that. If you can produce your own, boy, that's fantastic. That is just really cool. We weren't able to on Bradford. It didn't make sense from a site layout standpoint, and it didn't make sense for us financially. That was too big of a cost to even put it on to cover a portion of our electrical. But if we can't, and we couldn't on Bradford, working with the utility provider to purchase renewable energy. So consumers has been great in that. They've been a part of this process right from the beginning, and we're working with them now on making some rule changes with the MPSC to help make renewable energy more affordable that you can purchase directly from the grid. Consumers had started a program a few years ago with their solar system where you can buy renewable from them. Right now, it's fairly expensive, but they're making some changes to that to get that down. And hopefully by doing that, going forward, as more renewable energy comes online, it becomes closer and closer to our standard grid price for electricity, and that just becomes the standard. It's another reason why we're promoting all electric buildings, that even right now, if you're not buying renewable energy, if you have a choice between electric and gas appliances, by going with electric now, as the grid changes over the years, your percentage of renewables would go right up, right along with it. The final step, after we've done all of those things to reduce our carbon footprint, is to balance what's left, measure your carbon emissions, and then balance that by purchasing offsets. So basically, you come up with a total metric tons of carbon that you produce as a result of your operations, convert that to an offset, and you pay for it. You basically say, hey, I'm contributing this much in carbon, so now I'm going to contribute this much in dollars that will go towards creating some other renewable program that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So for us, we worked with a group called Entrex for their market, and we're going to get into this a little more in the presentation later about where do those offsets come from. The ones that we're getting are not local. They're supporting an electric and wind farm in India, but they're still helping to solve that global problem. If we can change that, if we can do local ones, then there's a whole other positive cycle that comes from reinvesting in your community. Those dollars stay local, and the community is getting the benefit of the environmental awareness. One more thing about the carbon offsets. Personally, I think this is a goal to it, is that as the cost of carbon offsets goes up, the desire to make those improvements to reduce your carbon footprint should also go up. So that as you're making decisions about your building selection, about materials and equipment that goes into it, or whether you're paying a little more for renewable energy, by making those choices from a financial standpoint, well, you would get the benefit savings on the purchase of offsets. Right now, this is all a voluntary process, so there's not a direct financial correlation to it, but it's still an important assessment to make. So with that, we'd like to talk a little bit about our Bradford Station project. And this is the first one that we've done this on. We've employed a lot of the same principles that Bazanni has done for years with building a LEED certified building. We're LEED for homes here. But then this one, we've gone, the next step for us is really evaluating our carbon footprint and getting to a net carbon zero project. And then we also want to point out that these are market rate apartments. We didn't get any grants or assistance in the development cost, that we can do environmentally responsible and be profitable without government or philanthropic resources. We think this is very much a project that can be done on a regular basis. With that, we'll brag a little bit about the project itself. They're all one bedrooms. This is a typical layout. They're about 600 square feet each. Again, not tiny, but we think it's right sized. It's perfect for one or two people. And these are some of the features in the building. And I want to go through them real quick because we talk about as we make design decisions, what are the things that you do to make a building carbon neutral? It's not always a direct correlation of this type of HVAC system. Some of it's just in trying to encourage and reward behavior that tenants would have that are lifestyle choices. And we were joking yesterday, our building does not have a rooftop pool. And I say nothing against rooftop pools. For some people, maybe that's what they want to have. We're betting that the people that are going to want to live in our building are going to be more excited about some of the other features than that rooftop pool. So that's where there's some cost trading and balances. Having secure bicycle storage. having a spot where people can keep their bikes. They're not lugging them up and down the stairs and putting them into their building. We want to make it easy for them to use their bike. By doing that, then they're not driving. They're reducing their mileage, reducing their carbon footprint. Porch and patio units and Juliet balconies and fresh air, these all kind of go together of getting the outdoors in, using, being able to have access to fresh air. Internet, not so much. Appliances, washer and dryer in the unit. We're a LEED certified building. The last one then, walking distance to restaurants and entertainment. Grand Rapids has got so many cool things going on. We want to be a part of that so that our tenants can enjoy that in a carbon-free building. We mentioned the COVID crisis, and this the sick building syndrome has certainly been something that's talked about for a long time. It started with the energy crisis in the 70s of sealing buildings up. We need to make sure our buildings don't leak. But then within that, boy, after that, find out, well, we got to make sure that we're getting fresh air into buildings too. And how do you do that in an energy efficient way? So the one thing about the system that we have that really came up, we thought about it after COVID, is that our buildings are 100%, or all of our units rather, are 100% fresh air. There is no air exchange with other units or common spaces in the building. So starts with fresh air. We need to have fresh air in spaces. Code allows you to just allow people to open their windows or open their patio doors or open their door going out into the common area, which we encourage, but you don't want to rely on it. In January and February, what is the reality? That most people are going to open their window to get a little fresh air. If it gets to that point that they feel like they have to, there's something wrong with your system. So the way we do that is through an energy recovery ventilator. So if, most people on the call are probably familiar with this is, but basically you have exhaust air going out of a building, and then I'll use the winter time, for instance, the air in your space is a nice, comfortable 70 degrees. You've spent all of that energy to heat it up. You don't want to just exhaust it out and lose all of that energy. So what this unit does is it pulls fresh, 20-degree air in from outside, which is nice and clean and fresh, but it's cold. It exchanges the energy and raises the temperature up without the air actually mixing with the air that you're exhausting out. So a great energy saver. The next component is our heating and cooling system. So this is a heat pump. It's a ductless system that just sits in the unit, pulls air in from the bottom, heats it or cools it, depending on what the thermostat is, and exhausts it out. So it's a pretty simple operation. This has got a refrigerant line set that goes up to a condenser on the roof, and it has a condensate drain in it that ties into the drain system in the unit. And then the last one is air distribution, so that we're moving air around the space. So if we look at our floor plan again, we have the ERV, the energy recovery ventilator. So that has the blue arrow here, fresh air coming in from outside, and then the stale air gets exhausted out. The bathroom has an exhaust fan. So that's controlled either by a switch or by a humidistat that exhausts air directly out of the building. That's the only direct exhaust. Then we have the mini split itself. So that just sits in the space and circulates the air around. And then the bedroom, since the bedroom is closed off with a door, we have a fan in the wall that pulls air from the living area and pushes it into the bedroom. So that gives you a constant supply of fresh air into all of the units. It's a great energy efficient system to save tenants money on their electric bill. And of course, everybody has their own thermostat that they can control their space. Few other things we're doing from a temperature control standpoint. We put a space heater into each of the bathrooms. It goes under the towel bar, and I think it's just such a lovely thing to, in the wintertime, it's cold outside, you can keep your thermostat low, you go into the bathroom in the morning, you flip the space heater on, it's a small space, it quickly heats up, and it keeps your towel nice and dry. It has its own exhaust fan on a humidistat that we talked about, so that you're not getting excessive moisture buildup in there. And then each of the units has its own laundry. And this has been a relatively new thing. We've used it on a few projects now, is a ventless dryer. So rather than the dryer exhausting the conditioned air outside, it recirculates that air within the dryer, has a condenser on it. It brings the water out of the clothes and dumps it down the drain, as opposed to taking all that moist air outside. The most important design consideration is thinking about our tenants. And turn that over to Heather.
Okay, thank you, Peter. We're extremely proud of this project, but at the end of the day, it's only a success if people actually want to live in it. So in addition to all the detail focused on creating a carbon neutral product, we need to appeal to the end user, whether they're interested in carbon neutrality or not. We hope they are, but we need this to be broadly appealing so that we can fill the units. It needs to be a nice place to live. So there we turn to the basics. We're offering an attractive exterior because people like to live in a nice looking building. We have desirable interior finishes, stainless steel appliances, current stylish cabinetry. As Peter mentioned, we're focused on a few well thought out amenities, such as the bicycle storage, some of the units with porches or patios, and probably now more important than ever is we have high-speed internet capability. And then, as Peter also mentioned, in this time of COVID, we're also featuring the health of our building with the 100% fresh air and the no recirculation between units. These are all creature comforts that will appeal to the general occupant and I believe the general population. As Peter said before, we're a B Corp, and we are committed to creating a sustainable product, but we're also a business. And we're proud of the fact that you can do both. Bradford Station is not a philanthropic endeavor. We've not received any grant money to make the building carbon neutral, but we've done it, and we believe it can be profitable as well as environmentally responsible. So if you visit the B Corp website, you'll see that it says B Corps function under the belief that society's most challenging problems can't be solved by government and nonprofits alone. And at Bazanni, what we're trying to do is use our business as a means to an end. And by doing that, we're going to have a positive impact on our community. So really everything here is twofold. We're focused on the carbon neutrality, we're creating a profitable product, and we're going to be able in turn to use our business as a means to an end and have a positive impact on the community. So marketing the product is very important to make sure people understand what we're doing, that they appreciate what we're doing. And as Peter said, hopefully we get our tenants to buy in and help continue to reduce their carbon footprint by the choices that they make. But I'll turn this back to Peter and he's going to explain more about the carbon offsets.
Thank you. So we brought it up a little bit, and we give you an opportunity to talk about the value of local offsets. There's a lot of work being done on this. Sherry and Jillian are heading up a team, I think, to try to make those available. The Kent County Department of Public Works is doing some great work in this area, and we were brainstorming about it a little bit, and just came up with some questions here of how can this be done? How can we further this this initiative? Can local programs be increased or modified, and offsets be made available to local businesses? A lot of what we're working with Consumers Energy on the Renewable Energy program, they're doing some just really cool stuff, but they're for really large companies. In order to qualify for the large customer renewable energy program that they have now, they've had for a little while, you have to be a megawatt of electricity demand user. That is a building 15 times as big as Bradford Station. That's like a 30-story building. It's great. It's great for those that can use it, but we need things that are more accessible for small businesses. I'm sorry, I'm getting off track here a little bit. We're talking about local local offsets, we've talked to people after going through the carbon neutrality process for our own business, talk to other people about it. When we get to the bit about talking about purchasing offsets, they make that comparison. Well, if those dollars aren't local, how can I compare that to other investments that I'm making in my community? Is it better to donate to a local food pantry that's making a huge difference for your neighbors, or purchasing offsets that are a small part of a wind or solar farm somewhere around the world? I don't have the answer for it. I just asked the question. So as I said, the West Michigan chapter of US Green Building Council is working on creating offsets. Are there other offset generating projects that could be undertaken that aren't funded? And I think there's an opportunity here as we get people to talk about this, that there's an unmet need in the general public and awareness for wanting to address the climate change issue through carbon offsetting. But what do you do? How do you get started with it? And if we can get something started, that need is out there, there's funding that becomes available as a result of it. And what would these projects look like, and who could invest in them? You know, some examples of like the work that the Department of Public Works is doing is in gathering all the trash, capturing all of the methane, burning it off for power generation. Methane is, I forget the number. I think it's 20 or 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide. If we can capture that, even if it's just burned off, that impact is huge compared to reducing our carbon footprint. Boy, capturing and reducing methane is great from a greenhouse gas emissions reduction standpoint. If we can capture it, burn it, generate electricity with it, well then, boy, now you're making money on it as opposed to just reducing the greenhouse emissions. And then you go one step further, and by doing that, you're creating carbon offsets. Then those carbon offsets can be purchased locally. And I love that example because it's a real world solution that works on a local basis, that it's a practical solution all the way around. And as Heather was saying, that is something that doesn't require a grant, it doesn't require ongoing philanthropy, it just works. And then can making local offsets available help raise awareness on our community? I think it definitely can. Not just about the need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but also highlight a relatively simple path to reaching net zero. And we talked about it a little bit, but I think it's worth going over again, of the idea: first, measure your carbon footprint. Go through that process. There's relatively easy ways of doing it, of assessing what is your carbon footprint. Where is your power coming from? Where are all your utility energy needs coming from? What kind of car do you drive? How many miles do you drive? Measure all of that. Figure out what it is. The next step is then purchasing offsets. And then with that process, looking back and saying, okay, where can I reduce? And the next year you try to reduce it. Then the following year, well, then you're purchasing less offsets. And it's a circular process then of measuring and getting better as you go through it. The next step for us is looing at what else can we be doing in a greenhouse gas emissions reduction. The evaluation process breaks our carbon footprint down into scope 1, 2, and 3. We've looked at scope 1 and 2 so far. And as Bazzani Building Company, we're a pretty small company. We have a small office, we've got some vehicles. It's pretty easy for us to evaluate our carbon footprint and offset that down to zero. We're not a manufacturer. We don't have a huge labor force. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm claiming, hey, we're great people because we've reached carbon neutrality. For us as an operating company, that was a fairly simple process. The next step for us to say is, well, as a builder, we're impacting a lot of activities that do have a heavier footprint. And we've got to do our part now to evaluate those and what things can we do around our upstream activities, which is all of the subs and suppliers and manufacturers. Are we picking the right products? Are we being careful about where products come from? And these are things that the LEED process has taught us over the years, right? If boy, buy local, get materials that don't come from more than 500 miles away and such. That stuff can be evaluated. And then the downstream activities, what are the results of the product that we put out into the market? What impact is that having on the marketplace? And this is where we're proud of what we've done with Bradford Station, is that on an ongoing basis, then that building should have a net zero carbon footprint. And on that, we'll say we don't 100% know yet. We think we've set it up for that, and we've purchased the offsets for the first year of operation, but we won't really know until we've had a year of operation. And then that'll be a continuous process ongoing, that every year we're going to look at how much energy did all of our tenants consume, how many people drive, how many people are really using the bikes. Another thing we're doing, and I wasn't aware of this until I started meeting with the Rapid team in Grand Rapids, of the bus passes that they have. They've got a really cool system where you can get a bus pass that ties into your credit card. You have an online account, and whenever you want to use the bus, you just pull out this pass and swipe it when you get on. You don't have to have change. You don't have to have money. So we're going to give everybody a bus pass. It doesn't cost very much, but just to get them started, because I know this has been a problem for me in the past when I thought about, you know what, I've never ridden the bus. I should do that. But I don't, because at the time, I don't know how much it cost. And geez, I don't have any change on me. All I have is a credit card. They don't have a credit card. So give people a pass, so at least they give it that try the first time. And then if they get to using it, well, then great. And then they just sign up for it, and it comes out of their system. And if people could start doing that, it really is pretty convenient. It does work well. Yeah, so that's the last little bit about our evaluation of the carbon process. And with that, a recap. So we started with why renewable energy and the importance of that of that 29% of the carbon emissions that are coming from buildings, a big portion of that is the energy, the fossil fuels that go into creating our energy. So boy, as we convert to a renewable energy, that number goes down substantially. But then other ones, steps to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, building design and construction. We talked about it for new construction. There's also a lot that can be done with renovating projects. What is your power source? Where is it coming from? Are you using gas, electricity? And then finally, offsets. And the opportunity, I think, that I would love to see come out of this is the opportunity for creating local offsets, and how that can be a positive cycle within our local community. And with that, thank you very much to Jillian and the rest of the West Michigan team.
Thank you so much,
Pass
Peter.
it back over to you.
Thank you so much. This was an amazing, amazing presentation. The kudos to you for delivering bus passes to the tenants. Or do you have an ability to see how frequently those will be used?
It's the first time we've done it. I don't know. I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is, boy, I don't want to make it out that this is a huge magnanimous thing on our part. I was just so impressed with that team. I think it's $3 each to get the bus pass. And to me, it's just making that step that gets them started with it. Because I think that is a roadblock. I think people don't know how to use it. And the times that they would use the bus are the times that they're not at their computer. They don't have their, well, I guess they have their phone. Everybody uses a phone now, but there's other reasons for not starting to use it. So we just give them the pass, just break that barrier, and then hopefully they go forward and use it. So we'll see. Yeah,
exactly. Break that barrier. And I mean, if I were one of your tenants, I think I would appreciate that first jump, you know? That's how I got my pass originally, was at the neighborhood summit. They were handing out, and I always wanted one. But but there was just other fires to put out in your immediate day, and you know,
Exactly.
you get around to it, you know. So
Oh,
like,
well, cool. Thanks for that feedback.
yeah, that's amazing. So for the attendees who have questions, make sure to use the Q&As that come through. I have questions that have been coming through the presentation, as well as many of you know about the early bird questions. So you had the opportunity the other day to send questions in ahead of time. And so we have that compiled in amongst the questions that have come into the presentation. And feel free to continue to use the chat or the Q&A to continue this dialogue as it goes. So this first question, Peter, is from Jan, who is an architect in Ann Arbor. And very simply, she asks, can you share your basic pro forma and how the costs relate to those developments, to other developments?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not prepared to share all of the numbers, not particularly opposed to it. And Jan, if we want to follow up afterwards, I would love to share that. I can tell you one thing we did on this project that made it work. As Heather said, you know, we're a for-profit developer, and for us to do this project, we had to go out and raise all of the money to build the thing. What we did on this one was we partnered with the existing landowner. So the person that owned the property that we built the building on wanted to see something happen with his property, but he didn't know what. He didn't need to sell it, but he also didn't want to make a huge investment in improving it. He's an older gentleman, and he and his wife are approaching retirement. They don't want to sign on for a long-term development and take on all of that risk, but we did. But what we were able to do is bring him on as a partner, so it helped with the initial funding of having that land partner in. And then other than that, it's the balance of all of the first cost and the cost of financing and everything versus the income that comes in from the apartments.
So Laura Clary asks, if this is actually about carbon offsets. She asks, how can you ensure that the carbon offsets funding is used appropriately? How is the system policed? And altruism is a good start, but can easily be abused later on. What is the consequences of them not meeting their goals? Which actually fits well with the question that had come in earlier about how did you choose carbon offsets that worked for you?
Yeah, boy, that is a great question. And I can tell you just very straightforward, we worked with a consultant out of Chicago, Net Zero Analysis, that helped us when we started down this path of evaluating our carbon footprint. That was for Bazanni Building Company as a building company. And then from there, we transitioned into, for Bradford Station, what do we think it's going to be? So for Bazanni Building Company, we knew what it was because we could actually put in, it was really a relatively simple process. We sent them all of our utility bills. We told them what kind of cars we drove and how many miles we drove. And from that, they were able to put it all together and say, okay, this is the number of offsets you need. And then from there, that led into a discussion of where do we purchase them from. We chose the Entrex market and look them up. It's I don't know if it's publicly traded. I think it's a publicly traded. Anyway, they've got all of the information on their website about the what you're actually buying. They have lots of different sources, and that's as far as we went with it. We were comfortable with the group. We were comfortable with the projects. But I have to say, I don't think that as a result of either Bazanni Building Company or Bradford Station being made carbon neutral, that we had a huge impact on those projects. You know, I'm pretty sure the wind and solar farm that we helped contribute to would have happened without us. You know, it's just it's such a small part. I mean, I still believe in it, and as I said, you know, I mean, you're still helping to offset challenges on a global basis. If I had the option to buy local credits, even if we paid more for them, I would definitely do it.
Why?
But right now we don't have that option.
Why is it important to buy local for you, being a B Corp and a local first member?
Yeah, boy. I think just because you can see the benefits, and you're keeping that local, and you're contributing to the economy at the same time that you're contributing to the greenhouse gas, to the climate change benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Which bridges well into a different question that had come up is, could you have made this carbon neutral without carbon offsets?
No.
No.
Just flat out no. There's we consume water in the building.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a way of doing that. We couldn't put a well in here and draw the water out of the ground with a solar powered generator, and water has a carbon footprint to it. We're getting public water that has to come from the system. Yeah, we just can't get there on a building like this. Yeah, and I think that kind of gets back to why was this project able to be done market rate apartments without any outside philanthropy. There are some of those balances, and again, our goal is to reduce the amount of offsets we need to purchase as much as possible, because I think by doing that, or well, I know by doing it, you're reducing your carbon emissions, right? Is the lowest you can get that with balancing all of these other things, the better. We gave up the rooftop pool so that we're reducing our carbon footprint, right? And we're hoping our tenants still like the building. But we're not gonna, there's only so far you can go with it.
For sure. There's a school of questions that are about the numbers and the management, and then there's a school of questions about the, I guess, what would I say, the actual nuts and bolts of what's working. Which school do you prefer to go into right now?
Oh boy. Without all of the numbers in front of us, I guess maybe the systems and the working side.
For sure. Yeah. A question that came through is, can you explain how 100% fresh air works in the winter? Is that not energy intensive?
Yeah, boy, that's a fantastic question, and that is all about that energy recovery ventilator. That you're bringing fresh air in, but you're preconditioning that air. It's not 100%, but you're preconditioning it using the exhaust air that you're sending out. So in most spaces and in ours, most of the air in the space from an air movement standpoint is recirculated. I don't know exactly what percentage, but it's 70 to 80% of the air in a space is constantly being recycled. Fresh air, which you need in a space, can come in a number of ways. Again, as I said, code-wise, you can get it by saying, well, we're going to open the windows. You're not going to do that in the middle of the winter. You should not rely on that for fresh air. So that energy recovery ventilator, what that does then is, of the 20 to 30% of the air in a space that we want to change over and bring in as fresh, we're going to exhaust it out. We're going to bring in fresh air, but then we're going to use that energy recovery ventilator to grab the energy out of that before we lose it, before we exhaust it out.
I guess my own question is, then once you recover the energy, where does that go?
Oh, it's exchanged right there. So that if it's 20 degrees outside and it's 70 degrees in your unit, you're exhausting 70-degree air, you're bringing in 20. So now, say those balance out evenly, and I don't know if they're quite even, or you maybe do a little better than that. Now, instead of bringing 20-degree air into your space, you're bringing 45 or 50-degree air into your space. So you only have to get that up to 70, you only have to raise the temperature then, what is that, 20 or 25 degrees. And then the opposite is true in the summertime. You're exhausting 70-degree air, but you're bringing in 90-degree air that's damp. You dry that air out and cool it down. Then the mini split, which is the other part of the HVAC system in the unit, which is actually the one that's doing the temperature change, that doesn't have to work as hard.
Right, right. That was a good question. I hope that answered for you, anonymous panelist, not panelist, attendee. So then with all these how did they write it? With all these expected, okay, essentially with all these individual units, like with their own equipment per unit, what's your expected maintenance and operation O&M for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple of things. One, maintenance, ongoing maintenance, right, of changing the filters regularly, and then we have a property management system that will do that. Regular inspections, maintenance, keeping the filters on the roof clean and such that you get a good airflow. And then as they need to be replaced, they just get replaced. It is a factor for this type of construction, I think, in that it is relatively easy to replace the equipment. You do have to go into the unit. You do have to go into the individual apartment to change the equipment because that's where all of the equipment is. But you don't have to tear into the building to do it. The equipment is all exposed and can be taken out and replaced.
Sure. So it's probably not as intensive as one might assume from first listen.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see. These the electric heat pumps have been around for a while. It is it's not a brand new technology by any means. There are a couple of features on the ones that we're getting that are relatively new. So we'll have to modify, or we'll have to just watch it over time.
Right. Right. And I mean, we had spoken about this earlier. You've constructed this and you designed it to be carbon neutral, but there's also a human component that you need your tenants to operate as such as well. So maybe you'll see as the building goes on and how it operates compared to what you had designed it to be.
Exactly.
Process.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And we hope to use that as a learning, both for us, but also for our tenants, to talk to them. And we've talked about doing some of those things of having meetings with the tenants and letting them know, hey, how are we doing as a building or as a group, with meeting those goals. We're going to be doing recycling, of course, but also composting. There's certain areas that I think in really large cities, you can't do composting. They have other ways of doing it. But in Grand Rapids, we can, and we've got a great composting service. So we'll provide that bin for people and a weekly pickup for them. And it prevents all of that waste from going into the either into the trash or we don't have garbage disposals. We don't want that stuff going into the sanitary sewer. Mm-hmm. So there's some behavioral things there that most likely people are already on board with and they're fine. But if not, it's just a little bit of a learning process for them.
For sure. Then I guess then also from the tenant perspective, how valuable is living in a carbon neutral location? What are your tenants' top priorities? Yeah,
that is a great question. And this is our first one. We can't wait to get the feedback from them.
For sure. And I think I remember Heather saying that when you do, I guess, onboard tenants, if that's what you call it, like you'll be asking that question right out, because you're curious as well, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Is this a factor in your decision to live here? And then it'll be interesting to chart over time, see if some of the tenants for whom maybe the carbon neutrality was not a big selling feature, if they start to embrace it as they learn more about it by living in our building.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. We have a question coming through about ZNE buildings overall. I know they talk about ZNE, not ZNC, which of yours is going carbon, not energy. But they asked, ZNE buildings are said to be more affordable throughout the lifespan of a building, though when looking at just a single stakeholder's perspective, example, the developer, the manager, the tenant, the ROI doesn't pan out. That's why we have a lot of our buildings who are not as green as they could be because the money doesn't make sense. So how is your model different and what make it or break it budget decisions did you have to make?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Boy, a lot of great questions. We evaluated producing our own power on site at the beginning of the project, and we went through a fairly exhaustive process, I guess. We looked at if we completely covered our roof with solar panels, and we did our, from our energy model, that would cover about 40% of the energy. And I thought, well, what about if we covered the parking lot? But then we're on the side of a hill and we got a bunch of trees. We couldn't get there just physically. And in a way, I think that made it easier for us to say, well,
yeah,
creating our own power won't work. Let's find another way. Even if it could, that is a tough nut to crack. And I'm sure there are a lot of people on the call who know a lot more about that process. We've done it on a small scale, but never for an entire building, to be able to get to net zero in production and for energy. And I fully support the idea, and boy, absolutely kudos to people that have done it and can break ground doing that and show that it can be done. We didn't see how we could do it on a project like this on a market rate basis. So it just made more sense for us to work directly with Consumers Energy on buying renewable power, so that we're still getting 100% renewable. USGBC doesn't look at it that way. They don't, they wouldn't give us credit for being 100% renewable because we're still getting it from the grid, which is fine. But from our carbon assessment, it does reduce the carbon impact quite a bit. It's, I forget the numbers, but I wanted to say it was about 2/3. If we look at the carbon emissions from standard grid power to renewable grid power, we're charged in carbon about 1/3 of what we would have been. Because there's still a carbon assessment. I mean, there's still carbon associated with the overall production and transmission and everything
Is that a calculation that Consumers was able to give you, or were you savvy and figured that out on your own?
No, it was a team process. Yeah, and we're still working through it. We're in the process of going through that with the MPSC here over the summer and some ongoing rulings and things.
That's amazing. I'd love to talk with you more about that. It's very cool.
Yeah, I definitely want to too, because way beyond our building or even our segment of residential buildings here, that being able to use renewable grid power is something that I think we should really try to push. Again, nothing against people that are generating their own power, and kudos for being able to do that. But I think it's a combination of showing utility companies that there is a demand, that there is a need. People will sign up for renewable energy. We just can't pay twice as much for it.
Yeah.
And one of the things we didn't really cover in this, but a big thing we wanted to do at the beginning of this was, and this relates to what Heather was saying about how do we balance our tenants' needs. We didn't want people to pay a premium in their utility bill for living in a net zero carbon building. Mm-hmm. So the balance we had was, well, we can charge people more per kilowatt hour for their electricity that is renewable, but we want to build an efficient building so they're using less kilowatts. And as long as those two things balance out, or we do a little better, then we felt like, okay, we met that criteria. So we did an energy model at the beginning of the project and did the HERS score, which looks at our energy efficiency relative to other similar buildings. And we got a pretty good score. I don't know if those models are always believable, because you're comparing yourself to a standard that is not really that great of a standard. Lots of people are building pretty energy efficient buildings. So, we don't want to compare ourselves to an older model. But still, we feel pretty comfortable we're going to be 10 to 15% plus more efficient than, maybe just another comparable building, just based on the things we were saying of building the right size, using an energy efficient HVAC system, smaller appliances, those kinds of things. that if we're saving somebody 10 to 15% in their utility consumption, then if they have to pay 10 to 15% more per kilowatt hour, they balance out, and you're getting the benefits of net zero carbon without paying a premium for it.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, 5 minutes left. Too many questions. Okay. Okay. From Kim, I'm continuing to try to get A&D contacts to specify the carbon neutral product. Most are on board. However, when it comes to the specifications of carbon neutral options, it is not always on the plumbing schedule. What is the best way to ensure when a designer, architect, or engineer do indeed want the carbon neutral options that it is carried through the wholesale plumbing contractor for the sale and ultimate installation? I hope
that question came in ahead of time, and I think it's, boy, I guess my response is that we looked at it in a more holistic way. That we said, okay, there's an opportunity to reach carbon neutrality in this building. How are we going to do it? Okay, first we're going to go all electric. We're going to do these energy efficiency things. We're going to try to minimize that as much as possible. And then in that detail of minimizing it as much as possible, I think is where Kim's question is. How do you really get into those details? Like one of the things that we really went back and forth on was how are we going to provide hot water? And that's an area that I don't think we really hit a home run on. I'm comfortable with the solution that we have, but every apartment now gets their own 30-gallon electric water heater. Mm-hmm. And they're pretty darn efficient now compared to what they used to be. Mm-hmm. But still, there's some pretty cool technology out there about having one hot water heater that circulates to all of the apartments that could have improved our efficiency a little bit. So that would have helped us in the carbon emissions. That would have reduced that amount. So we're buying less offsets again. But we weren't quite comfortable with the technology, and it had some impacts on our floor plan and all of that. So I don't know that looking at each product and trying to say that each product is going to meet a certain carbon neutrality standard is, I guess I'd say that's not the approach that we took. We took a more holistic. Now, that being said, as we kind of finished up our presentation, I said the next thing that we really want to look at is our scope 3 items of what are the products that are going into our building, and what is the carbon impact of the development of those products, and what does their operation do, downstream. So if it's plumbing fixtures that are consuming less water, well, that's an ongoing savings for the life of that fixture. That's going to reduce the carbon impact associated with water consumption, right? But then also, boy, what were the materials that went into that? And we're getting into that with exterior building materials, with insulation, with is wood framing better than steel framing, or doing all of that product analysis. And I'm not an expert on that, but I hope to be over the next couple of years.
So then just to touch on this real quick before we wrap up, Jan asks about your building materials, actually. Same Jan from before. She asks, did you think about embodied carbon when you were choosing your materials? I'm just going to slip that question in as the last one.
Yeah, that is definitely our focus now. We thought about it, yes, but not enough that we could measure it. We didn't do that tally, we didn't really go back through and look at environmental product data sheets for every one of our products and put that together. That information is becoming more available, and we're working with a few groups on trying to help streamline that process and have kind of a standard kit of parts, if you will, around the products that we use, so that we can evaluate that fairly easily and make those choices. But we're not there yet.
Right. So maybe the next development that you do, this will be even an improvement of what you were able to accomplish with Bradford Station, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, we've got a couple of projects in the works that we're starting to do that, and we can do it because we're in the planning phase. But you have to have all that information up front, right?
Right.
So that where we're looking at insulation? What is the R value of it? What is the cost of it?
Right.
What is the environmental, what is the carbon footprint? And then you can balance all of those and make those decisions all the way throughout. Yeah.
Well, if there's anything you should take away from this, is that we're all really excited to what you've done, and the chat is just filled with praise and thanks. And Brian acutely said maybe you should make a little internal battle of the buildings for your own tenants.
Oh, that is so cool.
That's an
I
idea.
love that idea.
So,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like that we all, across Michigan, we have multiple cities in the call right now that are really interested and filled with praise of what you've done. So thank you for, I guess, having the bravery to try to accomplish what supposedly is just a philanthropic opportunity. You've really changed the narrative on this.
Well, thank you so much for hosting us, and please reach out. I would love to continue the dialogue. We've got an awful lot of intelligent people on this call that I could learn from as well. So.
And I hope everybody caught Peter's contact information if you want to reach out to continue the dialogue. I hope that's okay, Peter.
Absolutely.
Let's keep this conversation going. It takes all of us as the construction community and the development community to make this carbon zero built environment. So lastly, we're right on the hour. Oh, I've stolen 1 minute of your time. So folks, thank you very much for being on the call. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all of you. Don't forget to fill out the How We Did survey. That's going to come to you later on with the recording and the slides from this presentation. Let us know quite simply what you thought of this, what did you learn, and what more do you want to see, and then we'll make that happen for you. Thank you very much to our visionary sponsors. And with that, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.